John, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just can't hear you.
No, was I muted? Well, I'm not now. I hope I wasn't muted all this time.
Thanks, John.
It's much better in person. No matter what we do, something goes wrong with the technology side of this. So anyway, I got my bees put in the box, and I've got the queen probably in my pocket or somewhere. And the cage was different than what I was used to. You know, they always had a cork on each end, and there's candy behind that cork. And so I pull out the cork, you know, looking for the candy, and going to put that cage in there. And here's the queen staring back out at me. And I panicked. I put it in the box. I didn't know what else to do with her rather than putting the cork back in, and put her in the bottom, put the frames in and closed it up, crossed my fingers. Luckily, that package had taken quite a while to get there, and the bees were used to the queen, and it went fine. But it's pretty overwhelming. And even if you get a nuke and it's your first time or your second time, you're going to want to make sure you got everything else set up and ready to go before you start shaking bees in or opening things up, because it's overwhelming, and any detail that you can take care of ahead of time is going to be time and anxiety ahead, I guess I'll say. Well, so a package of bees has a can of sugar syrup in it. And I think typically they account for 3-4 days, you know, in the shipping process getting to you. And once you have your package of bees, you can spray sugar syrup on it. So there's window screen on 2 sides. And if you can't get them installed right away, you can go out 2-3 times a day and spray sugar syrup on that screen, and the bees will come and take it off your screen. And if you spray a little bit of sugar syrup on it and they're really, really interested, that might mean that that can is empty, that they've gone through it. If they're not too awful interested in it, then you can assume that there's food in there. I keep doing it twice a day. They will feed the queen. So the queen is inside that package. She's in a little tiny cage inside of that bigger box, and the bees will cluster around her to protect her, and they will feed her through the screen of that cage. Yeah, at first she's in there for her own protection, because when they make up a package, they just shape random bees from different hives into these packages and put a queen in there that the bees have never seen before. And if she wasn't in a cage, yeah, he's got one, he'll pass around. If she wasn't in a cage, they'd kill her because they don't recognize her. It's not their queen. So typically a package, they call them a 3-pound package, and they actually weigh them. They shake 3 pounds of bees. Occasionally you'll find a 2-pound package or a 4-pound package, but 3 is definitely more common. Compared to a nuke, a package is usually less expensive. And a 3-pound package contains around 10,000 bees. But after you install the package of bees into your hive, it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks before there are any new bees emerging. So remember, when a queen lays an egg, it's going to take 21 days for that egg to go through the process to be an emerging adult. Usually don't weigh them, but there's a few less bees. I'll get to that. So there's like 10,000 bees in a package. And they ship those in from different hives. So those are bees of all different ages. Okay. And bees die after 4 to 6 weeks. They work themselves to death. So some of the bees in your package are 4 or 6 weeks old, and you're going to die right away. And some of them are younger. But it's going to take 3 weeks before any new bees can hatch. And even at that, the queen's going to start out fairly slow. If you're installing a package on foundation, they have to actually draw some of it out, so there's even a place for the queen to lay. So population is going to go down for at least 3 weeks, and then it's going to go up slowly because it starts out slow and you still got bees dying off. So it's not uncommon for new beekeepers to get pretty scared that there's not enough bees in here, and in the first 3 or 4 weeks it is noticeable. The population is going to go down. So let me see here. Something to keep in mind when you order a package of bees, you'll always get an estimated delivery date, and that is an estimate. Usually we have colder weather and they end up getting delayed, but I've seen 1 year where they actually came 2 weeks early. So make sure you have your equipment ready in plenty of time, because the package can be early, but anticipate you may have to make arrangements because it might be 2 or 3 weeks late as well. You don't need to smoke bees when you install in a package. It's actually probably beneficial if you don't, because once you get some of the bees in the hive, a good portion of them are going to go to the entrance and they start fanning that Nasonov gland, and that sends out a scent that tells the other bees this is the entrance, and the smoke interferes with that. So you spray a little bit of sugar syrup on a package of bees before you install them. If they were to get riled up, the sugar syrup has got them all sticky and they can't do a whole lot. I caution people not to spray a whole bunch of sugar syrup on a package if it's cold. If you're trying to sneak them in and it's 50 degrees and it's not real sunny out, you can really chill them if you spray a whole bunch of sugar syrup on them. And you'll see YouTube videos where they're just spraying and spraying and spraying and spraying, and it's like, I get the concept. You're trying to keep them from flying around a whole lot, but if it's cold, you're going to kill them. I'd rather that they flew around a little bit. It's what bees do. 1 to 1, or even a little less. So 1 part sugar to 2 parts water is even okay, because it's not so much that you're trying to feed them at this point; it's that you're trying to occupy them and wet them down a little bit, so they're not going to fly as much. Some people recommend installing packages late in the evening, so they'll settle down and they'll spend the whole night in the hive, and then they're less likely to abandon the hive since they've been in it for 12 hours. I don't know that I don't think that has a whole lot to do with it. I would recommend that if you have a 3 or 4 hour window where it's 50 degrees or more, that you should take that opportunity and get the bees in the box. Oh yeah. Yeah, and and they're going to do better in the box than they would in the package. So if you absolutely can't install them, you can put a package in your garage or in your back porch. Make sure that you're spraying sugar syrup on them, and I think I've heard of people going 4, 5, 6 days, not a problem. So if it's cold and you can't get them in there, they will live in that package. But like I said, if you have even 3 hours of 50 degrees, get them installed, because in the box they can move around. You can start feeding them sugar syrup. You'll want to make sure that the sugar syrup that you get them, if it's cold, is close enough that they can get to it. And I've talked about these feeders that they call it a Boardman feeder. It's a mason jar. It goes on the entrance, so you can just put a new mason jar on there. There's several reasons I don't like those. One is the bees. If the bees are up here in the box and they're clustered and they're staying warm, and the feeder is down here, it's got to be warm enough that they can leave the ball of bees and go out to that jar and bring it back in. So it's too far away when it's cold. Two, it's right by the entrance, so any other bees from a strong hive will come and smell it, and they can get to it really easily. I mean, they have to run in the hive that far to get to the Boardman feeder. And so the other bees from a stronger hive will figure that out, and they'll rob all the sugar syrup, and then when it's gone, they'll go in the hive and they'll rob all the honey out of it. So you could feed all of your hives, but that's not necessarily going to keep the strong one home. If there's enough bees in the strong one, 25% of them will drain their feeder, and 50% of them will go rob your other hives. So, the other thing I recommend you never do is open feed, and that's where you just feed sugar syrup out in the open, and any bees can come and get it. It's the same thing. They get in that mode of there's an easy meal around here somewhere, and then it runs out, and they continue to look for an easy meal, and that translates to robbing other hives. So if it's cold, well, actually, anytime you install a package and need to get them a boost, get them started, especially when your frames are all foundation, you need to start feeding them sugar syrup right away. And I like the feeders that go on top of the box. You usually have 2 areas that you can fill with syrup and an opening in the center, so the bees can come up through the center and get to the syrup and back down. So the bees are in this ball on top of the frames, or in between the frames and towards the top of the box, and that feeder is right above it. Nope. So that's a frame feeder, and that'd be my second choice. But so the top feeder, it's the same size as the box. It covers the whole top. And the frame feeder replaces the frame and goes down into the box. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got examples for later. So good. Yeah. Yep. All right. So we're going to watch a video on how to install a package. So I don't think I need to cover all of this in too much detail. I should talk a little bit about removing the cork, or whatever version of that is. So the idea is, if you take the cork out of the queen cage and there's that candy in there, it'll take 1 to 3 days for the bees to chew through the candy and release the queen. And that gives them time to get used to it. So it used to be 1 to 3 days was pretty good. For some reason, the queens aren't as high a quality, I guess, is what they used to be. And it takes longer for the bees to get used to it. So I recommend that you put the cage in there and leave the cork in for 3 days, then pull the cork out. So they've got at least the 3 days where they can't get to her. And one of the reasons I recommend that is I've heard of bees going through the candy in less than a day. So if you don't give them time to get used to her and they happen to be aggressive enough to get through that candy in 1 day, then they'll kill her because they're not used to that scent, that pheromone. So I think it's a good idea to leave the cork in for 3 days, come back, pull the cork out, let them release her. If you're worried that they're not getting through the candy, you can check in 3 days again. And if they haven't chewed all the way through it, then you can manually release her. It depends on the style of cage. Some of them have a cork on each end. The plastic ones have a door that flips open, or actually two doors that flip open. So hopefully we've got a couple of cages you can look at, but most of the time now it's really, I'd call it really cheap cage. It's got screen on one side, just one cork and no candy. When you put that queen cage in the hive, you have to make sure that the bees can get to the screen. So however you attach it to a frame or however you arrange it, make sure the bees can get to that screen, because they will feed the queens through the screen. If they can't get to the screen to feed her, then she's going to die. She won't eat the candy. I think that she'd have to have some kind of liquid, some kind of water to loosen it up enough so that she could eat it. So, see, I think it'd take about an hour for bees to get through a marshmallow. A lot of guys recommend that. It's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. All right. Okay, feed sugar syrup right away. Especially if they're drawing out foundation, they're going to need that to draw the foundation. They don't like the jar feeders. We talked about that. You'll find recipes out there for mixing up sugar syrup on the stove, and heat it and boil it and all that. It's really easy to scorch sugar if you heat it too fast, and it'll hurt the bees. And it's not hard at all to stir sugar syrup up without any heat. All it takes is time. So I mix it up in a 5-gallon bucket in my back porch, and I've got a drill with a paint stirrer. You can put it in a 2-gallon jug and shake it. But all you do is get your ratio right. 1 part water, 1 part sugar. Stir it, walk away, come back a couple hours later, stir it, walk away, come back a couple hours later, stir it. And I'll stir it 2 or 3 times. Like I'll mix one up in late evening, stir it 2 or 3 times, go to bed, stir it a few times in the morning, go to work, come home, stir it, feed it to the bees. Hot water, it will speed it up. Yeah. Yep. Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to find video from ISU. Watch that quick. It's on the installing package. Get that shared. Yeah, there's a lot of confusing bee videos out there. When sometimes it's the area that they're in. So you watch a video and the guy says, you got to do it this way. And he doesn't take into account that you're in a climate that has winter and he's in a climate that has summer all year long. Or you're in a climate that has humidity and he's dry all the time. So you have to kind of figure out sometimes who's giving the advice and what conditions are they keeping bees under, and are they different enough that I need to do something differently. This is ISU, so they're about as close as you can get to us. And I don't have sound. Bear with me. So that's just the microphone. We're going to need to look at, I think it's there. That's still mic. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that's it. So now I've got to get it. get back to Zoom so that I can share it on Zoom.
And you're going to lay those bees down, and you're going to coat them with that sugary water. And they're going to begin to get laden down with sugary water. They're going to begin to eat it, and they're going to get heavy. And you're going to chunk it on the ground. And what that does is that will loosen the bees from that queen, because they'll be up protecting her. And we're going to spray them a little bit more once they're on the bottom of that cage, or the package that you just bought. And you're going to quickly remove the queen cage from that package of bees. And we're going to take the queen out, take that cage that she comes in, and we're going to check her, make sure she's alive. On one end, there's a little entry port. And most commercial queen rearers will put a marshmallow plug in there. And that's meant to keep that queen in a cage in the hive body for long enough for those workers to become accustomed to her. Some producers will put a wooden plug in. And so first, make sure that there's a marshmallow plug in there, not a wooden plug. If there is a wooden plug, typically
So they don't offer you part 2. Oh, it is. Thank you.
3 pounds
But that's not a link.
weigh down sugary bees and fill them into that hive. And remember, you're in a bee suit, they can't get you.
But I think I've got part 2 here. Yeah.
The queen's now installed. Now the hard part, or the scary part for new bees to begin. You have to take that 3 pounds of weighed down sugary bees and fill them into that hive. And remember, you're in a bee suit, they can't get to you. Their only goal in life right now, the only thing they're worried about is to find that queen, to reestablish contact so that she is protected, and to begin their new life in a new box. So they're not going to be after you. They want to find her. So step back, prepare yourself. When you're ready, you take that hive package that you bought, that package of bees, and you take off the lid. That can either be its own lid, or in a lot of cases, that entrance is where they put a temporary feeder. Take that feeder out of sugar water and gently tip the package of bees onto the surface of these frames. They're going to be dumped out over top of the queen over all these frames. And in the course of 5 to 10 minutes, they will settle down through the frames. They will begin to clean those foundations. They will find the queen, make sure she's okay. They will begin the process of eating out that candy tail to release her out into the hive. Once those bees have settled down and you're not in fear of crushing them, you're going to want to put the lid on top of your hive. This keeps out rodents, it keeps out weather, and it's going to allow you to settle those bees down, keep them out for darkness. They're going to come in the front of the hive because it's a new hive with new bees, and it's rather weak at this point. The population hasn't built up. You're going to put an entrance reducer, a small rocket grid that reduces the opening that they can come into and out of down to about 1 inch. That just means that all of these only have to protect the entrance that's an inch in size. Right next to that, you're going to have a hive feeder. Early spring, when we install these bees, there's not a lot blooming out there. You need to feed them. They have no resources. They have no honey. They have to draw out the wax and the foundation for that queen to begin to lay. That happens much more quickly when you give them that 1 part sugar to 1 part water mixture that you also use to spray those bees down and to calm them down. You need to prepare a gallon or 2 gallons of that sugar mixture at a time on a healthy hive. You're going to be using a quart of sugar water per day. And that's what you're going to have to feed them before the blooms come in. Once the blooms are in, you can back off and you don't have to feed them so much. Now, our bees have been installed. We wait about 3 days. Once 3 days has gone by, you need to go back into that hive and check and make sure that they've released the queen from her little cage. If they haven't, go ahead and manually release her, make sure she's alive, make sure she's healthy, take that plug out. Now, in all the years that I've been beekeeping, I've never opened up a hive after 3 days and had the queen still in the cage. They're very effective at releasing her. After those 3 days go by, you've checked on them. You've made sure that they're working and accepting that new hive body. You then wait 7 to 10 days. And you're going to check your hive every 7 to 10 days. You want to make sure that they're drawing the comb out, that they have enough food. And once you have 7 out of the 10 frames with drawn out comb with active work going on, you're ready to put your next hive body on top. With that, it will give the queen more space and the bees more space because they will have begun to reproduce. And you need to have more space as your hive expands. With that, you're off and running as a new beekeeper. You've given your bees the best start in life that they could have in your new hive.
Okay, any questions on that? Sure. So you notice the queen cage there was all plastic. And when the all plastic ones, the bees can get to the queen from all around. So you don't have to be real careful about, just make sure they can get to part of the cage. But most likely, if you get a package, they always come with these wooden ones that have a screen on just one side. So, and those will have a thin strip of metal so you can like staple it to one of the frames, but make sure the screen is pointed down so that the bees can actually get to the screen to take care of it. Okay. Where am I? Oops. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about nukes. As far as a video, I've got one on my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and look for Lone Oak Honey Company or Lone Oak Honey Company channel, it's a little bit long and it's a little bit slow. And a nuke is a lot of times, I mean, if it's cold, you know, let's say it's 50, it's not going to be 50 for very long, and you just want to get them in a box. If your hands are big enough, you can grab all 4 frames, take them out of the nuke box, put them in the new box. Any bees that are left in there, knock them down in and close it all up and go. You don't have to lift every frame out. And you want to make sure that you put the frames in the new hive body in the same order that they came out of, so that everything is organized the way the bees had it. Especially in the spring when it's cold, you don't want to take the chance of taking some brood and moving it somewhere where it's now further away from the center and harder to keep warm. If it's warm enough, you know, you can go ahead and you can kind of inspect the bees when you're taking the frames out of the nuke and put them in a permanent hive. Yeah. Yep. If just assume that the queen is on every frame so that you don't pinch it or shake it or, you know, do anything that might damage the queen, because especially when you're new, it's hard to find the queen. So just assume that she's on every one of those, because there's only 4 or 5 frames in a nuke, and you know, she's on one of them, obviously, unless she's hiding down in the corner, which I've had happen. So a nuke is short for nucleus, which is basically it's a small, fully functioning hive. It's going to have frames of brood, hopefully more than 1 frame. There'll be eggs, there'll be larvae, there'll be capped brood, so all stages. A lot of times you'll have one frame that's honey and or nectar and some pollen. So it basically got all of the stores. Sometimes instead of being 5 frames, it'll be 4 frames and 1 of those feeder frames. Usually they're building nukes up by feeding them. They got to have a place to to feed them. So a lot of times it's 4 frames and 1 feeder frame. So we mentioned before, a 3-pound package is 10,000 bees. 4-frame nuke has around 6,400 adult bees, but it also has around 1,400 eggs, larvae, capped brood. And so that capped brood is going to emerge in the next 3 weeks. So the population in a nuke isn't going to drop like it is in a package. As a matter of fact, it's a good chance the population in the nuke is just going to go up from day 1. So you may want to be aware of that. You may have to keep on top of the nuke a little bit more and make sure they're not running out of space. One thing about a nuke, you're getting somebody's old frames. Usually they're really old and crappy looking. And so any treatments that the beekeeper has put in his hives over the years will have a tendency to accumulate. You can get diseases from a nuke. It's a little less likely that you get a disease from a package. It's possible. So if you're into beekeeping and want to go treatment-free, all natural, you don't want chemicals in your hive, then a package might be the way to go, because you're just getting bees. You're not getting wax and wood and contaminants. So something to consider. Again, it's as simple as transferring them from the nuke box into the new hive and putting frames around them and putting a lid on it, putting it back together. One thing that's a little different about a nuke is you don't want to install them right away when you get home with them, because they're going to be stirred up from traveling. And in my experience, you've got 2 options when you move a hive and open it. The bees are either going to be really, really docile, or they're going to be really, really mad. And so what I usually do with the nuke, I'll have the box that it's going into all set up and in place, bring the nuke home, set it on top of that box. And then the next day, if it's warm enough, I'll install it. So you put the entrance facing the same way that the new entrance is going to face. So then you open it up so that they can fly. If it's warm enough, go ahead and let them fly. So they will get used to, this is where the hive is at. And let's say you come back the next day or 2 days later and you move those 4 frames into the box below and put the lid on. The bees that are out foraging will come back to where the entrance was. It's not there anymore, but it's about that far below it. And it's easy for them to find the entrance. Some bees will fly out, not pay any attention, and they'll come back and they'll try and go in the top and they'll figure out, oh, it's moved down here. If you put them somewhere else, like 3 foot away or 10 foot away, and they fly and they get used to that, and then you move them, Now they're gonna go 10 foot away where the entrance used to be, and it's gonna take them a while to figure out where it's at. So I always put it on top of the box I'm gonna put it in. You can also set the bottom board up where you're gonna put it, put the nuke on the bottom board, and then when you come back a day or two later, you put the real box there and put the frames in it. And then the entrance is in almost the exact same location. Oops. Sorry, jumped up. Any questions on nukes or the differences or preferences?
So we, you know, we could do it right away.
Same day? Yeah. Well, you may have gotten the other 50% that when you move them and open them up, they're really, really calm. But to me, it's about a 50-50 chance. They're either going to be really calm or really mad. So it's not necessarily going to hurt the bees so much, other than when they get riled up, you know, it does take them a few days to get settled down sometimes. So maybe you didn't get the calm side. So yeah, they can get fairly riled up after moving. So a little bit about feeding bees. You definitely don't need to feed the bees all the time, but there are several times a year, several situations where you do want to feed. So they need honey to keep warm when it's cold outside. So anytime that you think a hive is low enough on stores that they might freeze or starve to death, you need to do whatever you can do to get them some resources to keep them alive. In the wintertime, that might be, you know, dry sugar on top of newspapers like we were talking earlier. It's not great, but the bees can get to it because you put it right up above the frames on the newspaper, and there'll be some moisture in the hive they can use to turn that granulated sugar into sugar syrup. Do you know if the bees are in the bottom box or in the super? Okay. Well, and what I mean is when it's cold, where is the cluster? Most likely they're up in the super. Yeah. This time of year, I mean, if they aren't up in the super and the super is full of honey, then you don't have anything to worry about, because the ball of bees is down here and the honey is up here, and they can get to it if they need it. So if they're up in the upper box, and whether that's a deep or a medium or whatever, if the bees are all up in that upper box and they are running out of honey, then that's when you want to put something on top. Well, yeah, at this time of year, it's so cold. So, you know, anytime that it's cold and the bees need to stay in that cluster to stay warm, and you disrupt that cluster, it takes some time to get reorganized. And if it gets really cold before they get reorganized, then part of them are going to freeze. Well, it's your nighttime temperatures you need to pay most attention to. Yeah. So let's say you've got 2 boxes, and that cluster of bees is in between. You know, you got a ball of bees, but the division of the top box and the bottom box is in the center of that. And you lift that box up, you've now taken that ball and you split it in half. Okay. And if you happen to move those boxes around, now you got half of them up top, half of them in the bottom. In your case, you've got a super up top. You're talking about taking off. It's a smaller box, but the ball of bees could still be between the two. So manipulating it at all runs a risk of splitting that up. Yeah. Now, yep. Put the sugar on top of the super or whatever arrangement there is right now. Now, I was talking about Monday, it was warm enough that I opened up some of mine. And if I had found bees right here and over here, empty frames, I'd have pulled those empty frames out and I'd have put frames of honey in, because I have the honey, and because it was just warm enough to do that. It'll take me about 5 minutes. It's too cold to go much more than that because I have some dead outs that there was plenty of honey and the hives died, so now I've got frames of honey. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times that'll happen. The bees will move up into one side of the box and run out of honey over there, and it's too cold for them to get to the honey that's over here. So a lot of times in a dead out, you'll have frames of honey that you can use somewhere else or use again. Yep. Yep. So dry sugar works, sugar bricks or fondant, candy board, whatever you want to call it, that works really well in the winter. You have to have a spacer or something to allow the space to put that candy board on top of the frames and then put a hive together again. And we'll look at a spacer later. And Dean showed them last week too. The most likely time that you're going to need to feed or want to feed is in the spring of the year. So you want to start the bees getting revved up so that they can take advantage of the honey flow that's coming later. And I think kind of a good guideline is when the apple trees, when the spring fruit trees bloom, you could probably stop feeding and then just monitor closely and see if they need it again after that. With a packaged bees and new foundation, you may want to just feed right on through. But bees that overwintered, give them a boost, make sure they're doing good in the spring, and when the fruit trees start blooming, I think you can stop because there's plenty for them to do. And then after the fruit tree bloom, keep an eye on them and see if they need you to start again. Oh, I did pollen. One of them is protein and one of them is carbohydrates. That the pollen is their source of protein, and the nectar, the honey, is their source of carbs, and they need those two things. Especially they feed honey and pollen to the baby bees, the brood. For the first 2 days, they feed them nothing but royal jelly, which is something they secrete from a gland in their abdomen. But the bees that are producing that royal jelly have to eat a lot of honey and pollen so that they can produce the royal jelly. So they get all of their amino acids from the pollen. So 1-to-1 sugar syrup is what we use in the spring. And that has a tendency to simulate a nectar flow. So the bees think that there's nectar coming in. A few things that a nectar flow will do is it stimulates the queen to start laying more eggs. Therefore, the colony is going to raise more brood. It'll get the bees to draw out more comb. So if you're having them draw out comb, you probably need to be feeding. Bees are more likely to accept a new queen. So if you have to requeen a hive, it's a good idea to feed them sugar syrup, even if it's middle of summer. And they're more likely to raise new queens, like if something's wrong with the old one or if they're getting ready to swarm. So if the bees get too full, the box gets too full, and you're still feeding sugar syrup, there's another thing that's going to stimulate them to swarm. Yeah, and like I said before, I think it's safe to stop feeding when the fruit trees are blooming. We talked about mixing sugar syrup up without heating it. Yeah, it is important to stop feeding at some point. We talk about when one box, starting out with just one box, when it's about 80% full, it's time to put another box on, or you're going to run out of room. When that box is about 80% full, it's time to put another box on. In this case, it'd be a honey super. If you've got 2 deeps on and one of them's full and one of them's 80% full and you're putting a honey super on, there's no reason for you to be feeding sugar syrup at that point. You want them to make honey out of nectar. You want them to make honey out of the sugar syrup you feed them. And they will. And you might think that you're eating honey, but you're eating sugar that's been processed through a bee. So especially once you get the sugar, the honey supers on, you don't need to feed them. And you can feed so much that they'll get overcrowded and they'll swarm. So I don't know. I don't know, maybe new beekeepers do tend to overfeed. But, well, if they're making honey, then there was enough brood there to, yeah. Yep. All right. We'll show you the feeders. Again, I like the top feeders. Something to keep in mind when you install a package, we talked about, okay, you need to feed them right away. If it's cold, which usually around here it is, if it's, you know, going below 40 at night, make sure that the sugar syrup that you feed them can't drip on the cluster. There's no leaks or anything, because if the cluster gets wet and it's getting down below 40 degrees, it makes it really hard for them to stay warm. Even though it's sugar syrup and they could eat it, it's still wet, and wet bees do not handle the cold very well. So a lot of times people will use a mason jar with a couple of holes poked in it as a feeder. You put that above the frames and then put an empty box on top of it. That works great, but make sure it's off to the side of the cluster if it's cold out. That way you don't get them all wet right in the center. If you get the queen wet and the bees around the queen wet and they can't generate the heat, she's going to die. Okay, yeah, if your bees are still drawing out foundation, you keep feeding to get them to continue to draw it out. Okay, I think at this point, we want to do your dead out next. Let's do that. So if Dave, you want to get the camera set up, and we'll look at Dean's dead out. Danielle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I'm going to take my other computer. I don't remember what it's labeled, but I'm going to take that out into the lobby and see if you can see through that. But Dave's also going to hook up his good camera. And I made you co-host, so if you can spotlight Dave, I think that will work best for you. But if something
Okay.
goes wrong, you can spotlight the other laptop, and I'll have it out there too.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Make sure you stand right in front of the camera.
That wasn't what I wanted to do, or was it? It was.
You and Dave both
And if
have
you
your
need to mute
microphones
anything,
on.
Danielle, please feel free to do so.
Okay.
Try and put this up here as a backup.
Okay. Well, as we were talking earlier about checking your hives at this time of year, when I'm checking mine, you can see bees coming in and out of the front, you know, you got bees in there. Sometimes it's cold enough that they aren't flying around. So my check would be to take my outer cover off and just pop this off a little bit. Sometimes the bees will be clustered up here at the top. I see them moving, put back together and done, because you know you have live bees in here. But when I check this hive and there's bees in here, but none of them are moving, I knew this one was dead. So why is it dead? Anybody know?
Have no idea.
Let's take a look.
We have to, this is a good chance to take a look, because we aren't going to hurt anything. And a mess in here. I did pull 2 frames out, I think, the other day, because I just wanted to make sure there was no bees down below. Now, do you think they starved?
No.
There's a full frame of honey right there. So that can go in another hive someplace. This one's even fuller.
Man,
But I still see no bees. This is why your hive will weigh a lot if you get going in the winter.
can I hold? Yeah, these are good. Can I see how heavy these are? That's really heavy for,
Now you can see these bees are around there. Some of them have been eating and stuff. It's hard to tell exactly what's wrong with it. And then this next frame,
oh, there's their cluster.
there's part of the cluster like John was talking about.
Oh,
What do you see?
Lots of dead bees.
And
Well, what else?
what about them? What position are they in?
Oh, they're all facing up.
no,
For the most
they
part.
got their heads in the middle. I mean, they're,
Well, it isn't like they all have their heads down in the cells. This
No.
is one thing I saw. There's like these little brown spots on there. I didn't quite know what that was.
So you see the circular pattern on those two frames?
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
See
yeah.
it's smaller on
That's their
that side.
clusters.
I'll flip that over. And it's bigger there. And then you see the frame that's still in the hive. There's a bigger ball there. So that's what, when we're talking about a ball of bees in the hive, those frames are in between the ball.
Mhm.
But that's the round.
Hmm.
So that's how big this cluster was, right in that area. Hardly any bees on that side, so they were just on these three frames or so.
They're doing a good job of eating the honey.
Well, what do we see here?
Brood. Isn't that what that is?
Looks like a cat brood in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
certainly is, yeah.
Why would there be calf brood?
Because the queen was probably laying a few eggs.
Oh,
But this is what was interesting to me. See all the little brown specks on the top?
Yeah, I see that a lot
Really?
in dead outs, and I don't know if it's just a little combination of moisture and wax, because every time they uncap a honey cell to eat it, there's wax.
and they
They don't
clean
eat
it
the
out.
wax.
Right.
It falls down to the bottom. Well, if you got condensation and wax.
Here, you
and a
pull the
little bit
next
of honey,
frame out.
I think that's kind of what you're looking at there.
See how it's stuck in there?
Mhm. Ours are always stuck.
Well, there's
Not very
another-
heavy.
More brood.
Mhm.
There's a brood there, too.
Yeah.
Seeing as you can
Way
see,
out of-
this is an older frame too,
Mhm.
compared to some of the newer ones, so this was probably out of a nuke or something.
And the brood's way over here in the house.
I was gonna say, did you notice there's around here and around here?
Yeah, there's one on that side.
So it's not
Almost like
quite
they
two
did it.
clusters, but they
Yeah.
were really odd shape, yeah.
Yum.
Yum.
Now feel that frame.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
So is that cat brood over here is too?
You- Yeah,
Kind of hit and miss, isn't it?
that might be like from last summer that they ever hatched. That one out there, and I wondered about one of the others. But the one where the bees are on it, that's recent.
Now, in the summertime, hold that one up. In the summertime, when all that's on there, would you scrape that off or would you just leave that on there?
I just leave it on.
Leave
If
it on
it,
there.
if it grows down a whole lot more and it's gonna be stuck on
Yeah,
these other
yeah.
ones, I would scrape that.
Okay, okay.
If it gets in your way, take it off.
Okay,
And if
okay.
it doesn't,
I like things we need in early. See how heavy this is? That's a lot of honey.
so in the center here,
It's full.
there are bees in the cells. They've got their heads in the cells
Yeah.
and their butts sticking out. And then on the other side, there's the same thing. That's how they transfer heat through the frames. You've got bees on this side with their heads in, bees on this side with their heads in. And that, transfers it through the wax. And then you've got, what we're seeing here is mainly the bees that are in between frames. But I'm also thinking, there's no honey down here. There's a little bit out here. There isn't anything over here. So it's almost like they got a little bit stranded. They got a
They were
little
getting to
bit
the top.
separated from the honey.
But you had this candy board right on top too.
You did, okay.
But the telling tale will be the next box.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait.
Let's
There
see
you
what's in
go.
the bottom box.
Okay.
How you gonna do that?
Oh, that's easy. It's already hooked.
Let's set it right over here. Now that's what I would scrape off.
Yeah, yeah. That's it.
You can see the ball was starting to come up through into the other layer.
So I'm pretty sure that that is the wax that they removed from the honey cells that they, would you agree?
Sure, it could be.
That's
That's
what I
right.
think.
So let's
Yeah.
That's
pull
what I
out
had a
those
lot of.
corner frames there. How are you gonna get those out when it's all stuck together?
How close to the focus?
I don't know. How are you guys?
Not quite that close, I don't think, John.
How's that?
No.
No?
I'm not pushing into the macro mode, I don't think.
Okay.
Don't break the box.
You wanna go on the outside. Yeah.
Definitely feels like wax.
Anyway, show me how this is done.
I did show you.
These are the things
Okay.
that look really easy.
But you gotta get out of the way of the
Now you're
camera.
right in.
Go ahead and do it yourself.
Oh, okay.
See how they're just drawing out that comb on that foundation that isn't all filled out?
So they left it so fall came, winter came and they had honey, but it wasn't capped.
Well, this is capped there.
Here, down here, isn't there honey in there and not capped?
No, there's no honey down there.
Oh.
They don't even have the wax drawn
No,
out
no, I
there.
was looking into it here. It looks like it's,
Show that to the camera too.
oh,
That's right, we got one person on Zoom.
that's right. That's what I was saying last week. I didn't get to see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Do what we can.
I think it's a little yellow. It's like a stripe to it. Yeah. Shoe, shoehorn.
Plenty of honey there.
Plenty of honey there
My
too.
husband's a bag of
Okay.
potatoes. He didn't make all that stuff.
So they don't stay in the bottom box till they use all the honey up, they'll come
No.
right to the top box.
They'll be clustered in the center and they always kind of move up, it isn't like we'll go clean out this bottom box before we move up like you probably would at home.
Yeah.
My bottom box didn't have a lot of honey.
Well, then maybe be smart with the super on the bottom.
See, at a point like this is where you want to just kind of slide the frame over just a little bit like that. And then it loosens it up and then you can pick the next one.
Looks like the ball though was between the two. Being here and everything.
Right
else.
over here.
Somebody's down there.
Yeah, so where did we find the ball of bees in the top box?
Which
Not
side?
directly above that.
Left or my side?
Your side.
Your side.
Right, and where are we finding honey in the bottom box?
On this
On
side.
this side.
So in winter time when it's cold, and we haven't really had that cold, but I think it's probably gotta be 50. over that little cluster.
That one's pretty much empty.
So
Well, that's
they
good.
move up very easily because you just keep going up in between the frames. But as far as to like go from the top right to the bottom left. we got one nice
Is there
long
pollen in
area.
So sure. Basically, you're gonna find your sweet. Then you'll find your honey circle around that and make these.
Well, you can see the different colors. So let somebody else pull one of the frames. Don't you see the different colors in there? The orange, the red. Yeah.
If you can't, you want to have the center full. And then hopefully. in
Go ahead,
the
Lori,
fall
I'll take
time,
some of the frames out.
the bees will figure out all the honey from.
You're getting in the messy
start
part
out in
now.
the center.
Oh, great.
So you want to try and get as much as you can in the center. if you don't have enough to have it 100%.
So they probably started down here and they cleaned all that out as they moved up.
If they didn't come over to this side.
No,
That's the other thing, if you don't
no,
have
that's all a lot of pollen in there yet.
20 full frames, then the top box.
Now, that's an all plastic frame too. It isn't a wooden
Yeah.
frame.
Center and bottom.
So why is there so much
And
pollen?
it's kind of hard to manipulate.
something they had
that
stored up.
well,
Okay, so in
But,
case they
yeah.
had some
Because
in the spring beforehand, or, I mean,
Or
will
stuff
they
that
ever
they
use
didn't
it?
use in the fall.
Will they come back and use it?
Perhaps.
Left or right if they have to, so.
No, we're not seeing a lot of bees on there either, but there's a lot of pollen.
Pollen to see in the middle of the frame,
Sure. Yeah.
where the ball.
So was there
really
honey
is,
then all
where
around the
hive
outside?
is
Cause
at.
there's, I see something.
Yeah.
That's honey up there.
And they'll follow the honey. If long enough that they can get a few bees out to know, hey, it's over here, they'll tend to follow it.
That situation you're on now, Dean, can be kind of confusing the first 20 times you see it.
Oh, that's what it's
Where you've
like.
got honey all over the place, but then you've got just 4 frames of pure nectar. And so you don't know whether to, and especially if you see that in a super, you don't know whether to take it, leave it, or what to do with it.
Sure.
And that down the bottom box like that, you're wondering why the bees are not processing that.
So it's not honey.
You're wondering why they didn't turn that nectar into honey?
Yeah,
They didn't have enough time.
right.
You know, a lot of times they'll bring nectar in and it takes time to process it into honey, and then cold weather hits and they can't process it anymore. Because the turning nectar into honey,
See
there's
if we
a
can
ton
see
of
the blue one.
evaporation going on there. You know,
Really?
dry it down to 18% moisture and I don't know what it starts out at,
Yeah.
almost pure water. So it's a huge evaporation process. So when it gets too cold, they can't do it anymore.
Oh, this was the honey.
And so this is a full frame of honey also.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that side look like? Because that would have been part of a cluster originally.
Yeah, this is full of honey too.
Mm-hmm. Stayed on one side of it, didn't they?
Let's get that last one out.
Oh,
Turn your book around the other way. Nope.
this,
There you go. Yes.
last time I said that if you're gonna, somebody has.
Lift up. There you go. Give it around.
Use
I'll
the
let you
flat
sit on
side
that.
like lever and push it out.
Oh, okay. It's great when you're not in bee suit to be able to do this. Oh, man.
Another full frame of honey.
Yeah.
So what is a deep frame of honey? 9 pounds?
Could be.
I think that's what.
So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 70 pounds of honey in here.
Sure.
So they didn't starve.
They had the honey, but where they ended up, they ran out, or they
Is that
were
kind of like
running.
painting yourself in a corner?
Kind of, yeah. Because it's got to be warm enough for that cluster to move, you know, for them to even move from this side of this box to that side. It's got to be fairly warm for them to, 1, communicate, and 2, make that decision and move all the way across there. So, you know, when they're up here, and you can see there were bees all the way up to the top. So they can start moving across the top frames. And the bees that are down here can come up and over, but great frame to use as an example. If they were all here
Mhm.
and they're out of honey all the way around, then it's not so easy for them to move up. You know, they physically can't get from this side of the frame to that side of the frame without traveling from here across. And it's cold every direction that
Okay.
you go. Okay, so when that ball gets tighter and tighter, a lot of times you'll get into a hive and you'll find a ball of dead bees about this big, 3 frames away from the cluster. Because as the ball got tighter, yeah, they couldn't get out of the center of the.
So do you
frame.
suppose because it's so cold on the outside, that's why they didn't eat the honey on the outsides then, because that's what was intense coldness against the wood?
I think they tend to stay in the center of the hive because it's warmer or
Mhm.
easier to keep warm. Yeah. So we were talking if you've got 20 frames and you don't have 20 frames of honey,
but you want to set them up going into winter, I would recommend that the top box is as full of frames of honey as you can get it, because that's where they're gonna.
And make
be
sure
up.
that if you have two empty ones on the outsides of the bottom,
Yeah, maybe, yeah, the outside, I would never put empty ones in the middle.
right,
So yes, you'd want to make sure that, the top box is, if you can, 10 frames full. If you can't, make sure that the center is full. If you've got the top box that's 10 frames of honey, then the center of the bottom box is as many frames of honey as you can get in the center. You could leave the outside of the bottom empty because they're not going to have too many opportunities to use it because they're going to move up through the center.
so what do we think then? Do we think that they basically starved then?
Perhaps.
They couldn't get enough food and then they froze?
The candy board on top, they should have been able to do something with that. It's not as good as honey because they have to have moisture. They have to be able to turn that candy board into something that's like sugar syrup and then be able to eat it. Honey would be much better.
Plus they gotta travel up to get it and then come back down.
If it's right on top of these frames though, then
Yeah.
they can't, it's right there.
And the hive right next to it, the same way, had that candy board and the bees were just covering that like crazy.
And these bees are on honey on this outside frame. here.
Yeah.
They are on capped honey. And this one, they're not too awful far from some nectar. It wasn't completely made into honey yet. I'm wondering if it was a matter of it got cold quickly and they couldn't cluster up enough to stay warm.
Got some nice algae, just.
They spread out and they were raising brood. So they had spread out some and maybe it got cold quick and that's what got them.
Our bottom one had a screen versus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so do you like it like that? With the screen?
Doesn't matter if I like it, do the bees like it?
That's what I mean, based on your experience. How did your bees feel about that?
They don't tell me, so it's hard telling.
I seen on a YouTube video where the guy saved honey. And then instead of feeding them the sugar boards, he had little trays and he poured honey in it, or
Okay.
would that work better than?
Feeding honey is tricky because they will get stuck in it and they will drown in it. They'll drown in honey worse than they will in sugar syrup. I don't know why.
Well, no, I mean, instead of the sugar boards.
Yeah. But if it's.
How do they
if
get to
it's-
the honey without stepping in the honey?
Yeah, if it's liquid honey, maybe you could somehow turn it into cream honey.
And what does
I
this
don't
look
know
like?
for sure.
I know, I just seen it on a
Almost
YouTube
looks
video where the
like
guy
that.
had some extra honey and
With the
he
hive
was gonna feed them, and so
beetle,
he had these little trays, so he poured
infestation.
some honey in these trays. And I don't remember if he had something in there for them like to sit on.
If there's a way for the bees to get to the honey without getting
Must
stuck
be
in it,
teeny tiny.
yeah.
Hive
In the
beetles.
winter time, that's.
Yeah.
How you make that work and honey at 40 degrees or 30 degrees. They gotta warm it up to do anything with it. Because they're used to dealing with it. It's under the wax capping.
Mhm.
And then when you take the cap off, honey is thick enough and the cells are small enough, plus the cells are angled.
Okay.
So they go up from the center to the outside edge. So when they take a cap off, the honey doesn't run out of the cells. So, they've got it combined basically, and they don't have to worry about getting all stuck all over. Plus, it's a little bit at a time, one little cell at a time.
And they can't sting you.
You know, the
now.
guy did it on
Hmm?
TV.
They
I
can't
was just
sting you
wondering if
now,
that might be
right?
better
No,
than
they're
sugar
shouldn't.
boards, but-
Well, it doesn't mean they can't still
A
sting
friend of
you.
mine did something similar. He took, added a super on top and then put crumpled up newspaper in there and jars of honey on their sides.
Pretty small bees here too.
The honey crystals.
Fuzzy ones right there.
Eating it, and then enough bees got stuck
Newly
in it.
emerged,
All
most of these.
jars.
There's a difference in size.
Yep.
Like that one's
He
longer.
lost the hive.
Yeah.
From that one.
So this is a fresh baby here.
And I don't know where this guy lived. And it
Yeah.
seemed like it was
Fresh
warm
baby.
weather because
So-
he did open the hive.
Sounds like Don was saying, when we watch this. you can
Get you-
notice his
Get the
personality.
camera in
Yeah,
different,
yeah.
picture of the different cages.
Now with these full frames of honey, do you think it'd be
Yeah,
a good
it's too
idea?
close.
Well, you're
It's
taking
too
all my,
close.
that I can
Yep.
get home and eat it now.
Yep, I'm showing off the different cages.
There's a variety.
There is.
if I did any treatment for the mites.
Can't
that
get it
could
open.
be in
There we go.
So I don't wanna
So that's how those
take
open,
that for myself.
So you'll
which you
get
don't
those-
want to learn with 1,000 bees.
So
buzzing
you
in
get
and
a
a valuable queen in
More
it.
bees or something.
And then there's just one cork on that
Well,
one.
pretty much
Yeah.
a good start for
And
me.
the corpse on top.
In that,
Or is that when you hang that on the frame?
Yeah, I got a story.
These
That's why
queens.
it's like,
So when I put them in a nuke, queens in a nuke.
and then this just got a piece of plastic
So here's.
in
6
addition to a
frames,
hole where the cork would go.
As long as the screen is not against the comb,
Yep.
you're good.
Yep. You want to tell your story about this?
sure. So John asked me to talk about requeening, and one of the things that I always think of is that acronym KISS. But since I work with elementary kids, it's called keep it super simple, not simple stupid, you know? As first year beekeepers, get in there, dig around, and you're gonna make mistakes. And if you want to hear about mistakes, I got a list of them going on. So John was talking about the requeening, and when you get those bees, that package was my very first one. And I watched a YouTube and thinking, okay, good, I got this. And the person on the YouTube said, well, when you get your queen, and this came out of that package, that box, to put 2 little finishing nails bent like this. And then when you've got your bees in there, take, oops, oh my gosh. Please. Take one of the frames and set it aside, and then don't use it again for a week. And set your queen like that and hang it there. Well, that was a great plan, because the bees got to her, they let her out, it was all golden. What I didn't know was that when I set my full feeder on there, got one right down here, I was having trouble taking the thing off, and I couldn't figure out why. And that's because in this empty space, the bees built a whole frame of wax and attached it to the bottom of my feeder. So I lost all of those resources. They survived. I managed to keep them alive for the summer. But when you see things like this, watch those YouTubes, it's like, okay, was this the best plan? This
So
one,
you didn't go back in a week later, pull that out for,
I did go in a week later, and they had built all that.
Oh, just a
Well, they
week.
can do that in 3-4 days.
Yeah,
Oh.
remember I had a feeder, I had this feeder on top, I was feeding them 1-to-1, so they had plenty of access, life was good, they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. I was the dummy.
So when you think about YouTube advice, and I mentioned before, where is it coming from? Okay, think about the other possibilities. So what rule did it violate there? We talked about the rule of bee space. Too much. Yeah, if it's more than about 3/4 of an inch, they're gonna fill it with comb.
Yep.
If it's less than 1/4 inch, they're gonna fill it with propolis. And that was enough space that they thought there should be comb.
And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. I was like, oh, man. So then you learn, and this is another big kit here, and I think you already showed it on there, John,
A little bit.
of being able to wedge it, as that one guy was just showing, between 2. And he had, I think, it sticking up a little bit. If you've already got some drawn comb, what I've done is then just pushed it into the comb and then slid the other frame over, and it works perfect. You've got to watch this.
Like there, you can just push it right.
Yeah, you
in
can
there.
just push it right in there. There's like an opening, squish it down, slide your next frame right in.
The wax will hold it.
And the frame is
especially
down.
2 frames.
little screen.
Yep.
Yeah, so the bees can get to it.
Pointing down.
I mean, we talked in there, you know, till we were like 3 to 4 days. So when I got my new queen, he told me 1 day. He said, after a day, go ahead and let her out. So that probably wasn't enough time because I lost my whole life.
And right away, did it die right away?
I don't know. I mean, I let her loose and then I don't think she did right away, but
You know, it's kind of a toss up. If it was in a package and like I said, if it took 3-4 days to get to you, they probably were used to her and it was okay. But unless you really know the guy who's delivering them and talk to them enough to know the story.
Mhm.
Like Kelly Lyons usually knows the day that they made them, you know, when it took to get.
see, I got mine from Aaron. So he just had it in a little plastic thing and they told me just go home and lay it in there, you know, between the frames or
Was she got
whatever.
the
And then
bees with
after
them?
a day, just let her out.
Okay, yeah, and as far as a new queen, especially, got a hive and something goes wrong with the queen, you accidentally kill it, and You put in a new queen and new hive, I'd say for sure 3 days before you. And then maybe let them slow release with the king. Well,
Another thing you can do with a queen cell like this, is I've taken bees out of a building and stuff, and you got the queen in a cage. You put her on there and take a big rubber band and just rubber band this cage on there too.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, definitely.
And then the bees will chew through that rubber band, break it off and drag it out to the front.
Oh.
So you don't have to worry about that.
What happens to a little plastic cage?
Well, you'll probably find that when you do an inspection.
Oh, okay.
It'll show
Sometime.
up again. It'll show up again.
It'd be in the poop. though.
Yeah. So Don was asking me too to talk about the requeening of how do you know when to requeen? What do you do? And so I thought, well, let's go to the emergency situation first, where, okay, is my queen there? And when I said as a new beekeeper, take your time, go through all of your hives, take a look at it. But you'll reach a point where you go, I don't need to see the queen. And she can be elusive. And you might remember John telling you, we were out at one of his frames looking for, one of his colonies looking for a queen. I think we went from top to bottom and then bottom to top, and we're on our way down again before.
yeah, we looked
The
at
two of
every
us.
frame twice, and we were going the third time around.
Uh-huh.
Two people.
Two of us checking it all out, and she must have been quick, because man, we did, and then all of a sudden, it's like she was ready to say, hey, I'm here, boys. I'm like, oh, God, finally. So, but one thing you look for is as you're going through, generally I pull out this frame first, and then as you saw Dean do it, just pop and loosen them up. What do you really look for? Is your queen there? If you're seeing eggs or really young larvae or cat brood, you think, okay, my queen is probably there. I don't need to go any farther. Right? But if you're not seeing that, if things aren't right, where's my queen? Me, I've discovered it's probably more than likely my error, because you do something, maybe you're in a hurry, you pull that frame off and crook it like that, and what'd you just do? Your poor queen was there. You rolled her, you squished her, she fell down, you're not gonna find her.
So you remember those frames you were asking about, like cleaning that stuff off the bottom and how far that stuck out? Think about if you're not being careful, what happens? That comb that's sticking out the bottom drags across the frame alongside of it as you pull it up, and it rolls all the bees into the queen.
She was there as well, yep. Or let's say that she was on this frame and you didn't see her, and you set it down here in the grass, and you're going the rest of the way. If that queen falls in that grass, are you ever gonna see her? Same as taking this off. When you go to your next one, I usually set mine, put it on the lid like that. That way, if she does drop, maybe I can catch her again. Maybe I'll see her in there. But then you do silly kind of things too. Are you gonna talk about mite treatment more?
Yeah, at some point,
In the
yeah.
future?
I guess
Okay.
next week.
Well, if we got time, I used to how do I want to say this? I used to scrape off to catch my bees like this, because I thought, well, I got marked queens, I'll see them quick, not there. I shifted to a method that John showed me about shaking them into a dish pan. And so I looked at a frame, didn't see my queen, I knew she was marked, her life was good, shook them into a dish pan, set this down, went to grab another one to get enough bees, and my wife says, hey, you got a queen here. Where my marked queen went, I have no idea. But if I had done the scrape off of the frame, the odds are good I would have taken that queen with me. So we immediately caught her, set her back in safe. And so you could just do silly little things by not seeing them. They're easy to not see, aren't they?
Absolutely easy to not see. I had one in my hand, and only after I reviewed the video, I looked away for a second to pick something up. She got out of my glove and fell outside the hive, but I didn't know it until after I looked at the video going,
Yep.
There's no queen in that hive again for some reason. I know she was there, I had her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dropped her outside the box and didn't know it.
Yeah, super easy. Or you do something because you're like a curious individual, like Don was talking about, you pop that cork off and there's the queen, and not like, dang it. Then you get your thumb in there quick enough and there she goes, or there she went, and we know she could survive. Or remember this one, John? I got 2 queens from John and going to introduce them to a nuke, and I wanted to make sure that I could get this off later. And so I popped it. It's like, okay, we're good. And I pushed it back on, and I set it down, and I did something else, and I turned around, and the queen is sitting on top of it looking at me. I didn't tell you that. So you have those little, they happen, things like that happen.
Everybody gets stories to tell.
Yeah, always there. So when you don't see what you're looking for in the caproot, the larvae, you know you're gonna have to requeen. So how do you do it? Buy a queen somewhere. They're gonna cost probably as much as the postage will, depending where you're having shipped from. Call somebody you know and say, hey, you got a spare queen. Go to our Facebook page. Wait, hey, has anybody got something? And then you've seen how we can introduce them. But what if you got a queen already? So for me, you're talking about nukes. I run nukes as well, and I do a double nuke this time of year. And so let's say that you've got a queen in this nuke and you've lost something here. You want to make sure you can get it. I'm going to borrow this first. If you're putting just a nuke right on a deep, they've got these neat little boards that are something like that, that fit just that nuke. When we talk about a newspaper, and that's where you want to set that newspaper right there, just like that. If you want to make just a couple little slits, you can. The bees will get through it. And then when your queen is in here, you get her set up.
Where's the queen at? You have her
She
down-
would be in here because I've already raised her somewhere else.
Okay.
All right. So now they will have time to communicate back and forth, time to touch each other, pass that pheromone back and forth. I left it for a week. That were due.
With the news, you just have newspaper in between,
Mhm.
so it doesn't take them long at all for a few bees to get through the newspaper, but you gotta account for, this box is full of bees that are already used to the queen.
Mhm.
Oh, that, okay, so they're full
Yep,
of these
yep.
too.
Bees and queen.
And can they get out?
Yep, well, through the newspaper.
Through the newspaper.
And there's an entrance
Yeah.
here.
And I got just a
Oh,
little
okay,
bitty.
so the bees that are in there. can get-
Yeah. So the bees down here that lost a queen that aren't used to this one, a few of them will get up and a few of these bees will get down. And those bees start mixing and the queen pheromone is on the bees and they pass it from bee to bee. So yeah, there's enough bees up here that are used to the queen and they are mixing somewhat gradually. It doesn't take them very long to get to newspaper.
No, it really
I
doesn't.
bet they'll have that chewed out of there in 2 days.
Yep.
And it'll all be coming out the front door.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Everything's coming out here. And so you think, okay, I think we're pretty good. Let that up. And yeah, your newspaper's pretty much shredded and gone. If they accepted the queen, she's there. She's there. So at that point, then what I do is clean off the rest of that newspaper, pull this off, set it somewhere, set a second deep, and then just shake every one of those frames. So I make sure I've got them. And then if unless I'm not using those frames, if I'm using those same frames, I'll just put them right back in.
Pull the paper.
Pull
please.
the paper, got it. You catch that?
There you go.
That looks like,
Yes. So you made that?
no ma'am, I purchased that.
Oh,
The other
You
thing,
can make them.
sure.
the other thing I would mention to early beekeepers is to be confident right away to inspect the hive and to look for exactly what we're saying. Look for larvae, look for capped brood.
Yep.
Know how to recognize those. If you do not see those, call someone right away. Because if you don't, if you wait 2 or 3 weeks, now you've got a problem with a laying worker in there.
Oh, okay.
And then it'll be 10 times harder to introduce a queen.
Yep.
So you have to learn how to notice it right away when that problem happens and figure out how you're going to get another queen as soon as possible. I've had it happen a couple times and I'll call John first and say, queen, no. Then I call.
Thanks.
I don't call Dean, I call Barb. Queen, no. And then I order it from somewhere and get it in there. Now I know enough. 3rd year, 4th, this is going into my 4th year. I now know how to raise queens to repopulate a hive if I need to. So I'm not really
And that's the
nervous about it.
advantage too of having nukes available.
Yes.
And so you've got more a queen hotel, motel. I'm trying one of those this year. Have you ever done one before?
Not
It's
sure
got
which one.
three sections with 3 different doors so that you can have just little mini colonies.
So one
Ready to
box
spray.
with 3 columns.
Two frame boxes, yeah.
With 4 of them, with 4 frames. you know.
Yeah.
We talked about that shim for your sugar.
Mhm.
This is what it would be without the plywood on it. So it's just something like that. Put your newspaper on there, put that on there, put your sugar on. and
Well,
your
couldn't I
lid on.
use something just like, could I just use that? Paper here?
Nate, what about your insulation? Just pull your insulation out. Sugar in there instead.
Probably not. You
That's
could,
pretty deep, isn't it?
But that's the idea, is
Absolutely.
you need something like that. Let me see that. So you put your hard sugar bricks on top of the frames,
Mhm.
and then you cover them up with something like that.
because
It's
you
the
got
same
that
size
space
as the
there.
box. And then you put your regular lid on top of that. So it's all sealed up. And if you had to, if your sugar brick was only as tall as that is deep, you could do it this way too. But if it's taller, then you've got this gap in the air. You don't want a gap because the cold air comes
Right,
in.
right.
So you just need something to give you some space to put the hard sugar
And
bricks.
if you're using like pollen patties or winter patties also, you need that little bit of space for them to lay on the frames also.
I did bring a queen with me. She's not alive. I am the one who killed her, and I did it on purpose.
Really?
Yep, here's why, I know you, here's why. I had a colony going and introduced a new queen to them in a split, and I think we're talking about splits next time, so that you can double your population. And she was active, and she was beautiful, and she was everywhere, and she was like, hello, every time you open it, she came to greet you at the door. I mean, she was awesome. And she laid nothing. So if you think about one of these frames, if I'm right, Dean, is about 4,500 cells per side. And she at her best had 12 really spotty cap brood per side at best.
Did you give her a chance for another week?
Another week, she had 3 weeks. That's how long I waited and worked with her. And then I finally said, oh, I hate to do this. And my wife said, I know that you do. So I caught her and put her in the queen cage and then just stuck her immediately in the freezer so that I could use her for an example later. So she's not totally worthless or useless. But then let's say that this was her colony. There was drawn comb in there. So it was good to go. And there were some nurse bees or some bees in there. So what I did was I had another single deep that had a really excellent queen. Put a newspaper on top, made a couple slits, set this other one on there that was now queenless. And I did it all same day, because I didn't want them to go to a possible worker bee that was laying or try to create an emergency cell out of an egg that wasn't that good. These ladies can't go anywhere now. Their choice is they have to go down through the newspaper. And by the time they got there, it was one happy marriage inside of this hive. And they produced, I think, 2 supers of honey on top of that off of the first year box down here. So was it worth it? The answer was yeah. Because these were the ladies would have had to build up all of this strong home, and that lady was going to build her. So you have to make some tough decisions sometimes.
I've never seen a queen bee.
Yeah, that's why.
So, yeah, so it's like, okay, there really is a difference in size.
Yeah, go ahead and like, you can dump her out, put her in
Oh,
somebody's,
no, I was able to
in
see her.
somebody's hand and put the two
Yeah,
together.
I was
Take
able
a
to
look,
see
show the
her.
camera too. It'd be great.
Usually I see these ones.
One more here.
Yeah, actually, that looks like that queen mark really well.
Yeah,
Just
at first, that was one of the things I thought was, okay, is she marked somehow that was maybe interfering with one of her legs or 2 of her legs? But it's really pretty minimal marking.
So will you mark them on the head?
The thorax. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it thorax?
Thorax, yeah, they got a little bald shiny spot.
You need to know what that is, because I was telling my wife, hold her by the thorax, hold her by the thorax. What's? What part is that?
Yeah, you can see the size difference.
Oh, yeah.
I never realized what a difference that is. So
Because I'd like to mark
I've never
mine.
seen a queen.
When I get
When I looked through ours, I never did see one.
See, the tail and the abdomen is where all the egg parts come from, so you don't want to be squeezing that part at all.
It's always exciting when you see her. Well, it is at our house.
Well, I'm excited to catch drones and mark them just for the heck of it.
I was gonna say, if you're gonna practice, if you're gonna pick up a queen, practice picking up drones before you actually.
And why would you pick up a queen?
So on the YouTube, okay, yeah, this thing.
Oh,
So the YouTube video guy had this thing. We pushed it down.
We said or plunger, or,
Yeah.
John, you had one little contraption.
One-handed one.
Yeah, the one-handed one.
Yeah, I've
I
seen
like
that
those.
too.
Yes.
That's what I do too.
Like
that. You get her, you work your way up to the top so you can see her where you want.
She'd be flipped over. right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, hopefully.
So
You gotta wait around.
Stand by
you
her
gotta
line.
wait around till she's down there. So then you just push her up so she can't walk around.
And then the.
And
Oh,
then
and
you
then
put that
they
little dot of
Yep, I
paint
don't
on
think.
it.
And then certain color markers per year, right?
Yeah. Certain color for each year.
Yep.
Changes every, there's
Every-
5 different colors, so you can tell if
Last
it's
year
last
was-
years or 5 years
Yep,
ago.
that was the last year.
This year will be yellow.
As you can see, she's got open.
What's the oldest you've ever had a queen?
4 years.
I don't know if I've ever had one marked long enough to know, but as far as marked ones, for sure, 3 years, is probably as far as I've gotten. Yeah. They used to say that replace your queens every other year. Once upon a time, they said every 3 years. Now they're recommending every year. I don't- Queens just aren't as good quality as they
Will
used
they
to.
replace themselves or do you actually have to?
The bees will detect if the queen is failing and they'll rate it.
It might take her years before they figure out.
I got the next one.
I think that most of the time they're pretty good at figuring it out and replacing them on time. It's when they aren't good at figuring it out that's when we start to notice, hey, this population is losing something wrong here, and we intervene and replace her. But I think most bees are pretty good about knowing when it's time. I think a lot of times our queens get replaced without us knowing it, and business goes on as usual.
One thing you want to be careful with these markers, if it's in the summertime and it's hot, this ink expands a little bit. So I always go like that. A little bit, because there's that dot that would have been on there.
Oh, sure.
Because I've done that, put it on the queen and you get this splat coming out. So I always touch it on something first, so now I only have that little bit of paint to go on and that'll be enough.
That touching it, the whatever's at the tip moves in and lets a little bit of paint.
Right.
So like sometimes the first time you do that, you get a big glob of paint, and you don't need to touch that hard again until you're out of paint. All right, well, we'll probably take a little bit of a bathroom break, and I've got some more we can cover. And
If you want to speak.
Now I go home and find drones, I can check it out. That looks like a queen over there around.
Where can I find the drone right now, though?
Well, that was right.
I'm really good at it. I try to do that. Get this back in. Well, so far, nobody's gotten dropped that I'm aware of this week anyway. I'm suspicious that maybe having me cabled might be benefiting the whole Zoom call. Who knows?
It could be. But we are 30 minutes past our bit.
Oh, is that when it was kicking us off before?
7:45.
Okay, all right. Who's not muted? There. I haven't watched all of the recordings. I've watched bits and pieces of it. It's rough, but it's just kind of the best that we can do.
Right.
But it might be better this week because I'm actually running through a cable through the wall instead of trying to use their Wi-Fi. So it might be, and I'll do that next week too. So hopefully it records a little bit better if you have to watch it back.
Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Sorry to
Go
interrupt.
ahead.
I'm gonna have to go here in a
Am I
few
muted?
minutes.
I thought I was off of mute. No, I'm
Sorry
good.
to interrupt. I'm gonna have to go here in a few minutes.
Okay. All right.
I just
If
had
you
a
want to,
quick
I'm going to go over
question.
this section that I've been scrolling through on inspecting hives. And
I just had a real quick question.
oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a really big lag.
Be able to hear me. I'm not muted though.
Sorry, there's a really big lag.
Okay, go ahead.
So I live in town on a very small lot. What's the likelihood of being able to actually keep bees on my lot?
Okay. So the size of your property isn't all that important. Is that you, Dave? That's not you?
Your bees are gonna.
Sorry, we're having some troubles in the room here. Your
Dave
bees are
just
gonna
needs to mute
fly.
himself. There we go.
You got yours muted, Dave? Okay. So your bees are gonna fly, up to 2 miles is pretty common. They'll go further, but practical, for practical reasons, they're gonna stay within a couple of miles. So, it's the things that are around you. You wanna have enough space that your hives aren't, right by your neighbor's back door or a little bit out of sight. So, if you don't have much space, that can be a bit of a limiting factor. But it's probably going to be more dependent on what's going on, you know, within 2 miles of where you're at. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I'm sorry about my son in the
Hopefully
background.
that covered it.
Yes, it makes sense. I'm sorry about my son in the background.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
So my other
So,
question is,
I think we're back. Go ahead.
if I'm gonna keep bees outside of my fence next to my house, what's the likelihood of somebody trying to mess with them? Bees outside of my fence next to my house, what's the likelihood of somebody trying to mess with them?
Depends on your neighbors.
Yeah, it depends on your neighbors and how young they are or how immature they are. You know, if you've got a way of keeping them out of sight, it's going to be a benefit. And not even just for somebody messing with them, but if your neighbors don't know you have bees, then they won't come up with all of these problems. If they know you've got bees, you know, well, I got stung by this or I got stung by that, and I know it was your bee. So I think having them out of sight is helpful. And then, yeah, there's occasionally that, you know, neighborhood kids will throw rocks at them. I mean, I haven't had personal experience, but Justin Englehart had a couple of kids vandalize, what was it, 20 hives, 40 hives? And just, you know, knocked them all over, and it was in the middle of winter time, so the bees all died. So yeah, it can happen. It does happen. I haven't had any personal experience. I think somebody else in the club had somebody vandalize a hive or caught somebody on video camera, at least like looking in it or thinking about looking in it. So yeah, I'd keep them out of sight if you can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So we talked a little bit out there about inspecting hives, and I skipped a couple of things because I think it's a good topic to continue on. And I know that personally, I was reluctant to disturb the bees too much, or reluctant even to move the bees out of the way so I could see what was in the cells underneath them. And I think that's a pretty common tendency for new beekeepers. So, you know, you think that taking the top off of a hive is the equivalent of somebody ripping the roof off of your house when you're laying in bed. And it's really not. I don't understand why you can take a frame of bees out of a hive and hold them up to your face, and all but a couple of bees act like they don't even know you're there. So you're really not disturbing them as much as you think you are. So don't be afraid to move bees around and get a good look at what's going on. I mean, that's the only way you're going to learn. Someone I sat alongside of at one of the conventions was saying, and she was a doctor, she says, you have to see normal about 1,000 times before you can start to recognize abnormal. And when you're looking in your hive and you're looking at brood, that's what you're looking for, is when something isn't quite right, so you can intervene. You've got to see a lot of normal before you're going to start to recognize what's not normal. And I like to say you kind of work backwards. You don't have to tear right into the hive and go right into the center of it and look at the brood. You can start by looking at the outside of the hive. Look at the entrance before you even blow any smoke in there. Watch the entrance. Are they bringing in pollen? Is there enough activity? Is there, and I can't describe robbing, but there's a motion that robbing bees make that beekeepers recognize. I can't. But is there something different? You know, was this hive, most of the time there's a bee coming every couple of seconds, and now all of a sudden there's hundreds every second. That's something different that could indicate there's something going on. So with a little bit of experience, you can kind of get to the point where you know a little bit about what's going on just by watching the entrance. If they are bringing in pollen, it's not a guarantee, but it's most likely they're raising brood if they're bringing in pollen, or they're getting ready to. So you start from the top, obviously, we have to take the brick off and take the telescoping cover off and the inner cover. I always warn people, when you pop that inner cover off, that makes a sound that has a tendency to set the bees off. And I always make sure I've got my smoker right there. So as soon as I pop that up and it makes that sound, I put a puff or two of smoke underneath. And then I just put the lid back on and give it 30 seconds, let the smoke settle down in and have some time to take effect. But I always make sure I've got that smoker ready for that sound. And as you get more experienced, sometimes experienced beekeepers can tell a queenless hive as soon as they pop that cover off. It's got a different sound to the buzz, and I can't explain it, but I've heard it once or twice, and it's a thing that comes with experience. You'll know when it sounds different. There's actually software out there now. I've got it on my phone, but I haven't been able to use it too much. They say they can analyze the sounds in the hive and tell you if it's queenless, if it's got mites, if it's got foul brood, if it's getting ready to swarm. There's all kinds of things that a computer can hear about the sound. And so it makes sense to pay attention to the sound, and we can start to learn to recognize some of that at least. So the first thing in that top box, you're probably, especially you're starting on the outside frames, you're gonna start finding capped honey and open nectar. And you want to get an idea every time of, you know, how many frames are capped honey, how many frames are open nectar, and how many frames have they got space that they can expand into, okay? And then the next thing that you're going to start seeing is capped brood and pollen, okay? So you've got an idea, okay, I know how much honey is in there. Maybe it's not enough, maybe it's a lot. You'll get a feel for it, but the next thing you're going to want to look for is capped brood and pollen. Pollen stores, I don't know that they tell you a whole lot. I can't even really tell you how much pollen is normally in a healthy hive, but you should see some at least. If you're not seeing any pollen, maybe there's something going on. But capped brood is a very good indication of what's going on, how strong the hive is. After being capped, brood's going to emerge within 12 days. And one frame of capped brood is going to produce enough emerged bees to cover 3 frames. That goes back to this, if your box is 80% full, okay? If quite a few of those are frames of capped brood, within 12 days, there's going to be 3 frames of bees for every frame of capped brood. So boom, your population just exploded. The other thing is you want to examine enough capped brood that you get an idea of what normal looks like, because some of the brood diseases will start showing up as sunken cappings. So it's something to learn to look for. The nurse bees need a constant supply of pollen, honey, and nectar to produce the royal jelly that they feed to the larvae. So they tend to keep pollen around where they're raising the brood. And we saw that in some of the pictures last week. And brood, open brood or larva, little white, shiny, C-shaped, worm-looking things, those are very important when you're inspecting a hive, because the majority of your diseases are going to show up first in that white, shiny brood. So you want to make sure that you're, and again, you don't always have to go this deep and get to looking, but as you're new, you're going to want to look at it enough so you're getting an idea of what's normal, what's not, okay? As you've got some more experience, you can look at, okay, here's several patches of open larvae. This hive is doing fine. I don't need to go any further. I'm trying to paraphrase this and not read it, but I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So then the next stage, again, we're kind of working from top to bottom. We're working down. We're getting a little bit more fine-tuned. So now is eggs. And eggs are hard to see. It depends on what color the foundation is or what color the frames are. I've got a black plastic frame up here. Eggs are a lot easier to see on a black frame. or black foundation. I've got some yellow ones. It's not too bad. The white ones are kind of tough. It's probably easiest if you hold the frame up and the sun is shining over your shoulder, and then you can tip it so that the light's actually hitting the bottom of the cells, and that's when you'll start to see some eggs. Okay. And we talked about occasionally a virgin or a new queen will lay more than one egg per cell. So you'll see that occasionally on a new queen. But if you see lots and lots of eggs per cell, that's the laying worker issue. But a couple of eggs per cell for a new queen is not too uncommon. No, there's not. They will both hatch, but they won't fully develop. I think sometimes the bees will find one of the two larvae and remove it and let the other one. Or I guess I have seen a couple of times fairly good sized larvae, two in a cell, but I know they never result in normal bees. There's just no way the two of them can develop in that small space. You know, it's half the space that they should have. And that's if there's only two, you know.
The bigger issue is the hive stays protected. If it's got laying worker, it can be acting just like a regular hive. Except, and it's very difficult to accept outside queen. And that happens after about, rule of thumb, 3 weeks without a queen. I've seen it go a little longer than that, but I've also seen it where the laying worker had taken over and they killed the new queen just immediately. Because
Yeah. Once it's kind of a snowball effect, and once it gets out of hand, they won't accept a new queen.
You can identify which worker, because they're all the same.
no, there's not just one either.
And there's not just one.
There's going to be 100.
Yeah, there can be.
1,000.
Yep.
When you look at your root pattern, all it is growing.
Yeah.
Growing been all over the place.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that says one of them becomes the queen. Just
Yeah.
several can be.
And it's a pheromone thing. So part of the queen's job is the pheromone she gives off suppresses that laying instinct or laying ability in the workers. And so the queen is gone long enough and the queen pheromone is gone, and several of the workers develop that ability to lay, but they can never get mated, so they can never lay anything but unfertilized eggs. Can't amount to anything but drones. So there are times when you need to find the queen. If things are looking normal and you see capped brood and you see some open larvae, that's probably as far as you need to go, unless you're curious and want to keep going. If you see eggs, how many days does it take for an egg to hatch? 3. So if you see eggs, there was a queen there at least 3 days ago. Could have been an hour ago, but at least there was a queen 3 days ago. So if you see eggs and enough eggs, you don't need to go further looking for the queen. But there are definitely times when you need to find the queen. And one of the things that I find is most useful is as soon as you pull the frame out of the hive, look around the outer edge. Most likely you've got the sun to your back. We all just have a tendency to do it when we're outside, and the queen's going to go to the dark side of the frame. So if you've got the sun to your back and you look around the outside edge, you might see her going over the edge. That's a good trick for finding her. The other thing is look for the queen on frames where it's likely that the queen would be. So if you've got a frame of capped honey in your hand, not very likely the queen's going to be on that. There's no way for her to lay. There's people say that the queen won't walk across capped honey. She will, but rarely does she, because she's looking for open cells to lay eggs in, and she knows there's not going to be many in capped honey. So if you've got a frame of capped brood, okay, she might be on it, but again, she's looking for open cells to lay in. So if it's both sides are all capped brood, she's probably not on that frame. If you find a frame with open cells with nothing in them, or open cells with eggs, like if like we're trying to catch a queen for fill. If you're looking at a frame that's got eggs on it, the queen could have just been on that and laid those eggs. So there's a good one to focus on. The other thing is, if you move the frame just right and get the sun to kind of glint off of the backs of the bees, the queen reflects light differently. I mean, she's bigger and she's got different, maybe longer wings, but there's something different about that. So sometimes glint of light off the back of the queen will help you find her. And the way that she moves, the way that the bees react to her. So most of the time when bees are moving around, other bees don't really get out of their way or react, but for the queen they do. Or for the queen, they actually will turn and face her and see if she needs anything. So you can kind of see a circle of bees around the queen that move differently. But it takes practice is the main thing. Yeah.
She made the tether up and down in there first time she was scaling. And then she's out and she's moving around again. So it only takes virtually nothing, no time at all.
Sorry, now mine is moving really slow. So nectar in the brood nest. So I've had a couple of occasions when new beekeepers will call me and say, there's no queen, there's capped brood, but there's no open larva and there's no eggs. And I was in the brood nest and there's no queen in there. And then you go over and you pull out the brood frames and all of the cells where the queen could be laying are full of nectar. So there's no eggs because there's no place for the queen to lay. And the way you get there is if you don't have enough boxes on and the bees run out of places to store honey, as soon as a bee emerges, another bee comes along and puts nectar in that cell. So, the nectar is coming in and they got to have a place to put it. And the queen can't lay in that cell. And that kind of is another thing that kind of snowballs and takes off. So if you see that they're starting to backfill the brood nest with nectar, that's an indication you need to give them some space. And if you don't, that is the very first step in the swarm process. So they start filling up those places where the queen could lay with nectar. She can't lay anywhere else. She keeps looking and she'll find those queen cups that are empty cells that point down. She'll lay an egg in those. The bees will come and start feeding that royal jelly and raise a new queen, and the original queen and half the bees go out and swarm. So if you catch it at that stage where they're just starting to backfill the brood nest with nectar, you can give them some more space and you can prevent the swarm process. You catch it at the stage where they're already raising queens, some beekeepers will tell you, you just cut all of those queen cells out and you give them some space and they'll be okay. I don't think so. If they are that far into the swarm process, it's very hard to change their mind, for lack of a better term. You're better off to take every frame that's got, especially if they're capped. If they're capped, all of the resources have gone into them. The bees don't have to do anything now but keep them warm. So take every frame that's got a capped queen cell on it and put it in a new box with maybe another frame of bees. And you might end up with 2 or 3 or 4 of these, and they'll go out and get mated. Some of them won't, and you'll end up with 1 or 2 new queens out of it. And you have prevented the hive from swarming and losing half of the bees. It's a little bit advanced, and it's probably something where when you find queen cells, you might have to give one of us a call, but don't do nothing, because they will, half of the bees will swarm and leave, and then you'll end up with 1 new queen and an old queen out somewhere else. And it's a lot better off to have a couple of queens in nuke boxes that you can use to requeen an old hive, or use in case of an emergency, or overwinter them that way, or sell them. There's just a lot of options, and they're all better than just letting them swarm. So I think that covers the nectar in the brood nest. So one thing that will help, if you find that situation where they're starting to backfill the brood nest with nectar, put a frame of foundation in the center of the brood nest. So this is foundation that doesn't have anything drawn out on it yet, like this frame here. put it right in the center of the brood frames that are getting backfilled. And the bees will start to draw this out. And as soon as they draw it out, just a fraction of the end result, the queen will lay an egg in it. Before it's drawn out enough that it would hold nectar, the queen will lay an egg in it. So that gives the queen places to lay. She doesn't lay in queen cups, and you get enough of those in there and it'll reverse things. It'll stop the swarm process. But you got to catch it pretty early for that to work. And it does need to be an undrawn frame to really, really work. Yeah. Yeah. Take the one that's full of honey completely out of the hive and put this empty one in the middle of the brood nest. Yep. Yep. Okay. We will get into queens and things next week, I think.
That's why not just put 2 empty boxes on right away.
Yeah.
If there's a chance that it's full. These too much space. Put a Nuke in to 5 frames into the bottom box, and you set another second box on top of that with a super on it. You get totally overwhelmed by that empty space. And they just don't be productive in any way. They're all just be lazy.
So in this spring,
They want a nice, warm, cozy place to just like.
so will I pull my second hive back off, like top of my hive?
No, yours are mature hives.
Okay, so now you're good.
You're good. You're good. So if you have to start over or have to start a new box, you just don't put extra space on right away. And just to prevent the swarming. That will doesn't just get lazy.
But I won't take the super off, right? That's good.
See, you can, if you wanted to, for instance, if you knew that super had eggs in it, or had brood in it, or winter, or fall, you might want to examine that pretty closely once the bees have started to move or and see if you wanted to change those frames out, or if you wanted to put a queen excluder in. But those frames that have brood in them are probably not too good for putting honey in. They'll do it, but they're going to be pretty frames because of the brood. So you can do it either way. This is not easy. Tonight are not easy.
Yeah.
At the end of my first year, I could not tell the difference between the brood frame and the honey frame. That's deep.
Somebody want to catch that front light? So I've got some pictures. I'll try not to get too much longer tonight, but I've got some pictures I just Googled and brood frames and different brood diseases. And you guys can do this. You can probably see it a lot better at home, but this will give you a little bit of an idea of what to look for and what's going on. This is as big as I can get it. I apologize. But you can see in the center, we've got some cap brood. Look at that one. It's just getting capped. See the pearly white, healthy looking, shiny white brood underneath. And this is a pretty typical pattern. As you get further from the center of the frame, the brood gets younger. So it's smaller because it hasn't grown as much. There's a little tiny C-shaped larva right above my pointer there. There's a little tiny one there. And see how they're floating in that pool of royal jelly? So the royal jelly is almost the same color as the larva. It does get hard to see. But here's some really tiny ones, and they're a little bit bigger as you get towards the center, towards where they're capped. And this is a very healthy looking frame. I mean, that brood, that pure white and well fed, that's a good looking frame. Yes, yep, those are all worker bees. This one, you know, I'm not seeing anything real obvious about this one, but it is different. Can you see that? There's a lot of cells that aren't capped. Where's my title? I think that this one is just actually trying to show an example of a pore pattern. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of capped brood here, but right here in the center where this should be capped, it isn't. There's something going on here, and I don't think I really can tell you what it is, but I'd look at other frames. I'd look pretty closely at the rest of the frames in the brood nest. Anybody want to guess what these are? Queen cells. Yep. Very beginnings of queen cells, and they're kind of pointed different directions, but they're mostly oriented down. And that one, those are capped queen cells. And it's, yeah, they look like peanuts or morel mushrooms is what they look like to me.
So are there actually queens in there then?
You bet. Yep. Yep. Every single one of those have a
So
queen
now
in
what
it.
would happen then? If you had 7 queens, what would you do?
Well, if it was in a spot where I could cut them apart, I might try and cut some of those out, put them in a new hive, take the frame with still some queen cells on it, put them in a hive.
Take those two, leave the other cluster.
Yeah, you might be able to get those two off.
Put them in a different hive and make new queen.
Yep.
Or
Or
in your other frames, you might have two other frames that have queen cells.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. So if you end up with 3 frames with queen cells like this, then you make 3 splits and you leave the original hive where it is. Bare minimum would be of the frame with the queen cells and the bees attached to it. Another frame with all the bees attached that it's like honey or brood and honey. A bare minimum of 2 frames to get them started. I mean, if you're raising queens, you can go less than that, but if you don't want a lot of headaches, that's what I would say is the bare minimum to make a split. There again,
Or you could
Big
just
old
leave
queen
them
cell.
as is and see what happens too. You don't have to do so.
well, they kill the queens off and then you can't.
Well, you'll end up with one. queen.
you'll end up with 1. Yeah.
And that's a queen right there too?
Yep.
Wow, that's just funky.
So that one, it's kind of looks like it's in the center of a frame, and it looks like maybe it's older wax. The older the wax gets, the harder it is for the bees to reshape it. So this to me looks like they couldn't get that to point down. So what they'll do is they'll put so much royal jelly in it that that larva actually floats and floats up to the top, and then they build the queen cell down from there. So it's a lot bigger, and you can tell it's really on the surface of what was already brood comb. And you'll see that on older frames. So there again, that looks like pretty healthy larva. All open cells, a lot of royal jelly in it.
Those, all of those were laid within about 24 hours or so.
They're all really close in size. I mean, there's a few that are smaller and a few right here that are bigger. But yeah, probably within 24 hours.
That means she was there then. So if you find that, and you found in your, and that's all you discovered going into your inspection was that white larva like that. What should you do at that point?
Put it back together.
There you go.
Right.
As long as there's nothing else that looks wrong and you see good healthy larvae like that, yeah, you don't need to go any further.
Make a note. If you don't see the captain brood that goes with that.
Sure.
You want to go check that in about that within a week. make sure that those get capped and everything, and there's more of them. If she's still laying, then you're good to go. How do you remember what frame you saw that? Okay.
So this one,
Right on the frames too, they're yours.
yeah, that's true. So this one has a big hint. Does anybody know what this is? These are chalk brood mummies. Chalk brood is a disease that the brood will get, and it's like a mold or a fungus that attacks the brood before it becomes an adult bee. So they're about to get capped because they're pretty good sized, and they end up, the bees can pull them out and they look like little moldy mummies. And this is on the entrance of the hive. So they've been hauling them out. They just haven't gotten them all the way out the entrance. Chalk brood is one that's not a huge problem. So you might have a little bit of it in the spring when we have damper conditions and the nectar and pollen that are coming in are fluctuating because it might get cold and the bees can't go out and get any fresh food. And so nutrition is not real constant. And then when things clear up, it goes away. European foul brood, it's probably more likely European foul brood is like that in the spring, and it clears up when the nutrition comes back. Chalk brood, I've only seen it in my hives once or twice, and in someone else's once. So we don't have a lot of it, but it is something to keep an eye out for. I don't think that you would treat or do anything about it other than, maybe give them a couple of frames of honey if the hive is struggling. Make sure that they've got the nutrition to take care of things. There's another capped queen cell. Okay, so anybody see anything going on with this one? Yeah. So these are all roughly the same age based on location, and these are capped and these aren't. Not only are they not capped, this is the only one, this one and this one actually look like